Being 7 o'clock, let's call the meeting to order. We'll begin the pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lynn, would you call the roll?
Mr. Hand. Mr. Grover.
Here.
Mrs. Sullivan. Mr. Hoshansky.
Here.
Mrs. Vanderwater.
Here.
Ms. Lesniak. Here. Mr. Zachariah.
Here. I'd like a motion to approve the organizational meeting minutes from January 3rd.
Make that motion.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. The motion to approve the meeting minutes of January 3rd.
Make the motion. I'll second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Citizens' comments. Anyone wishing to address the board?
Kevin Bliss.
Can you step right up to the microphone, Kevin, and give us your name and address?
Yes, sir, and thank you. I came on the proposed solar code, and I was hoping
Can
to...
you have your name and address?
Oh, yeah, I didn't hear that part. Name is Kevin Bliss. I got a couple addresses. My office address is down in New York City, but I never go there. What would it be, 85? What's our address?
85 Broad Street.
85 Broad Street, but I live pretty local to this area. If I don't have to, I won't give you my house. That's where I work out mostly. Again, Kevin Bliss. If it's okay, what I would like to do, since I didn't really rehearse and I'm not great on my feet, is read a part of a letter that we're submitting, so in effect read it into the record. But I brought along some visual aids, and maybe I should grab them and bring them over here, I suppose.
Kevin, we are going to have a public hearing.
Oh, well, that's why I'm here.
Okay, so if you want
I can
to,
wait.
it probably would be more appropriate if you wanted to wait.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
thinking maybe it was better, but
Okay.
I was called up, so thanks.
Okay.
So this in regards to the public hearing.
Andy Bose.
I'll be back up to talk about the marijuana and maybe something on the solar too, if we're all lucky, we'll see. Kevin might hit what I'm talking about anyway, so who the heck knows? Let me see, I want to talk about new developments that are coming on, going to be considered, and encourage the town to consider looking at calming traffic solutions now, prior to potential Kriegel property development. Because, for instance, Kriegel Road and whatnot, that's going to be impacted a lot by construction traffic once that gets rolling. So I would think the town, I'd like to encourage the town to be out in front of that before that. You know, Kriegel Road and Downer could be simply, or Tappan could be just fog lines, and it's going to slow traffic down. But you've got some school districts or schools that are having problems. Maybe the town ought to consider hiring a small study. Just a small targeted traffic calming study. Because once you do one school area, you can look at the different opportunities that might be there. You can apply that to other schools as well. So, I mean, I think it'd be money well spent to see what some of the current design standards are, especially looking at, well, for instance, Kriegel Farms. And all those are all straight roads, every single one of them. And so there'll be some applicable stuff there across the town if you were to look into it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Okay. All right. We'll move on to item number 1, approve vouchers. Vouchers this time around were $118,586.97. Was there a correction on that?
Lynn, what do you think we should do about that one? There's a voucher in question for $33. We believe it was paid through last month's vouchers, but Lynn needs to do some research behind it. So I'm not sure how you want to move forward with that vote.
I would say we move forward with the voucher vacation as it sits. The worst case scenario is we'd end up with credit.
We have to
Yeah.
adjust it down to 33.
Okay.
And it's $33, so it's not a large amount, so I can make
It's
the
possible
motion.
that it didn't get paid last time, it just was reissued this time because it didn't get paid for.
It might have been still sitting in there, yeah.
All right, so we'll ask for a motion to pay the vouchers in the amount of $118,000, $118,586.97. Can I get a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any comments? That motion carries. Move on to item number 2, public hearing. So we'll ask for a motion to recess from our meeting, go into public hearing for comments on local law A24 to amend our soil regulations. We'll read the reading.
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are now in public hearing. Now, wait,
Yeah, sorry about that false start.
that's good, all right.
I'm also, this is a hard copy of the letter that I emailed you.
Nope, actually, I have it.
Oh, you have it, okay.
We printed it out forever.
all do.
But thank you for coming prepared, Nancy, I appreciate it.
Extra, I'll take it.
Yeah, I got it.
Nancy and I have become old friends already. Correspondence back and forth.
Nancy, did that letter have attachments, which are these figures?
Yes, they do have attachments on there.
It did have the exhibits on the back.
All right,
So we have that information.
Okay. I have a little bigger color one if that comes in handy. Should I use this microphone or can I speak?
You can take the microphone with you, but I would use the microphone.
It slides right out.
You can, just the microphone part, if you want to take it out.
Sure.
Okay.
Should just
Just pull it right out.
Hello. Thanks. And I'll spin this, well, you guys can see that, so maybe I'll make this a little closer. Stay. In case it helps, honey. Figure 1, figure 2. Again, Kevin Bliss. With me is Nancy Vlahos. She's a senior project manager at RIC Energy. I'm their environmental guy. And across New York State and even in some other states, we've put in commercial scale solar facilities. And we have a pretty good reputation. We've done some work locally and we're in the paper once in a while. Some of the quotes would be, best project ever from the town. That's a real one. Best plans we ever received. Oswego said that. But anyhow, that's beside the point. What I really wanted to get into today was the code's proposal for a 1,000-foot wetland setback. And that's gonna kill us in terms of siting solar in the town of Van Buren. And I wanted to go over some considerations on that issue. I'll speak to that because it's my area of expertise. I have a doctorate in wetland ecology. I'm a certified wetland scientist. For 30 some odd years, I was this area's DEC Bureau of Habitat Manager. Well, not for 30 years, but for some years. I was with DEC as a permit administrator for 30 years. But part of that was 20 years was this area, and I did the wetland work. So and I teach it at the graduate level over at ESF, 20 years worth. So that's a subject I know really well. I train folks on delineation, mitigation, and functional assessment, impact avoidance, and impact considerations. So that's what I do for a living. It's been a big part of my life. So I won't speak to noise and taxes and things that are probably even bigger concerns to most people, but I do that too, and so does Nancy. So if there's any time between now and ever that we can answer questions, you know, let alone any application we might submit, feel free to call on us. It won't really be the fox guarding the hen house. It'll be an objective opinion. I have helped other towns with their solar code development, and their feedback was that was really helpful. You know what can be done, what can't be done, and how to address any problems. Because there's going to be problems, but they can usually be addressed. How to do so requires kind of an honest, objective look at what can be done. And I've been doing it for 30 years, so I have a feel for some of that stuff. Anyhow, back on wetlands. The figure 1 that I have, this is the town of Van Buren with the currently, already mapped wetlands as far as New York State DEC and Army Corps of Engineers are concerned. And those are 2 out of the 3 entities mentioned in the code. So if they think it's a wetland, you got to be 1,000 feet away from it. There's also in the code referenced local government defined and recognized wetlands. And I'm a little ignorant to say, I don't know if more should be added to this map that are locally defined and recognized. If so, then the white space gets even smaller. A very important consideration is these are the wetlands that have been mapped by New York State DEC and Fish and Wildlife Service. That's a long time ago. They did that mapping based on aerial imagery from a longer time ago. And when it comes to actually doing work, you got to go to the property, and it might be right in the middle of this white space here or here, which isn't wetland, and you got to go there and say, are there any wetlands? And the answer is always yes. If you're not on somebody's roof, the answer is always yes, because the state has mapped approximately 1/3 of all the wetlands that they could have mapped because they missed them. The technology back then was limited. They didn't go to the site, but if it was a big open pond and the aerial showed open water, it's going to be mapped. If it's a cornfield, they didn't even look at it. But as a solar developer, if a farmer has more or less a played out cornfield or some field that's not too productive, they might say, I'd rather have a solar farm than a failing farm, a real farm. Or, as is happening, all my ancestors and dad were farmers, but
Yeah, I'm sorry to
their kids aren't.
interrupt. Well, we're talking first about the 1,000-foot setback from the wetlands.
Right.
What are some of the reasons why that would be not desirable?
Because when you include a couple of factors, and I'll cut it down from what's in the letter, you'll read that later, the ones that you consider right off the top are what's 1,000 feet now, and then add to that what would be added if you added the wetlands that will be discovered when you delineate the property, as is required. There will be no place in the town of Van Buren that won't require variance. That's one of the main reasons. So
Why is that a reason not to have a 1,000-foot setback?
Well, that was thinking.
The reason for variances is to put each individual project in the hands of our planning and zoning department. That's not necessarily a negative thing. Each project should be looked at in an individual fashion, not as a blanket. So, are there other reasons besides that?
Well, maybe I took too much liberty in thinking for the town, and I should never do that. You're the one who matters. But I assumed that if a project needed a special use permit and a site plan approval and a seeker review, which these will, then based on a lot of past experience, that was an individual review that looked at all issues and pretty thoroughly with the right to deny it based on whatever concerns are legitimately big or otherwise failing to meet standards. As versus, not only do you got to do that, but the presumption is you can't have solar, but you can try to get a variance. Because every town says, we're really not supposed to issue a variance permit, but you can apply, we'll see how it goes. So right off the bat, if the assumption is you're probably not going to allow solar, it seems like the deck is too stacked. as versus, we'll consider it, we'll look at what you want to do, and maybe we'll get a permit. Not, but you're not supposed to. So I would like to stop short of that. So that's one reason.
Okay.
Another reason
That does make several assumptions, but please continue.
Well, the assumption that it'll need a variance is pretty well documented. We did a lot of research into that.
That part wasn't the assumption, it was all the other stuff was the assumption. Are there any ecological reasons why we should allow a smaller setback?
Yes, start with, it means you're not beginning with an assumption that solar's not allowed in the town of Van Buren, in which case it's kind of
Well, we actually have a
different.
solar project working right now, so obviously it is. We have other solar projects that have been completed, so it's obviously allowed.
But they were approved prior to this code that
Correct.
prohibits it. So a little bit of apples and oranges there, I think. But okay. Another reason would be when you develop any code, it should be based on concerns that are thought through a lot. And like I said, I am a subject matter expert on wetlands and their functionality and their impact and how to mitigate them and how to avoid impacts, et cetera. And 1,000 feet away from a wetland, picture this. It's a cornfield that a farmer is saying, I ain't getting corn out of that anymore. Or my kids don't want to farm it. I'm going to put houses in. Well, how about a solar? Well, there's a wetland the size of that table that I delineated. This happened in a town not too far away with a similar code, 1,000-foot setback. Wetland was, well, bigger than the table, as big as this room. And I needed variance. And that wetland got plowed every year. It got planted with corn or soybeans every other year, one or the other. It got sprayed with herbicides. And corn is a monoculture with some pretty good Monsanto chemicals involved versus a solar facility. Native grasses, not plowed, not herbicided. From the standpoint of wetland ecology, that wetland was better off as the grassland of a solar facility than a cornfield. So I'm not saying, and therefore solar is great, you gotta allow it. I'm saying the assumption that you gotta be 1,000 feet away, and even if you're lucky enough to find an area that is, which you won't in this town, you're not helping the wetlands.
So what should the standard be in your opinion?
I think that if you had the time, there would be kind of what other agencies do. DEC, for example, they're the premier wetland folks, supposedly. They have standards based on the quality of the wetland to begin with. Figure 2.
1, 2, or 3.
Class 1, 2, 3, 4. This town has class 1, 2, and 3. Class 1 is the, quote, highest class. There should probably be a bigger setback for a class 1 wetland than say a class 3 or 4.
So as an example, you're saying that a class 1 might be a larger than 1,000-foot setback, and class 2 would be less than 1,000.
No, because 1,000 feet is excessive. A solar facility in an old field, today failing cornfield, that's mostly what we're dealing with. To be honest, we're not going to a beautiful forest and whacking down all the trees. We're going to some farmer that says, I ain't farming anymore, calls us, and will you put a solar
I
field?
understand that part of the reason for that 1,000-foot setback is when we do have a solar project, while there are people who are in favor of it, like yourself, there's going to be other people who are not in favor of it for all sorts of different reasons.
Right.
Aesthetics
For
being
sure.
one of them. So
Right.
that's one of the reasons why that 1,000-foot was decided is, while you're saying, 1,000-foot might be excessive from the viewpoint of
The wetland.
the wetland itself, but there are other reasons why people would come and say, no, that we don't want to see
For sure.
that, which is
Yeah.
one of the biggest complaints that we have, which is visibility.
That's very fair. I understand that concern, but I'm speaking to the setback for the wetland as versus setback for visibility's sake. I mean, there's a lot of places where nobody's gonna see the solar facility.
Absolutely true.
And to say, yeah, but because of the visual concerns, we want it to be 1,000 feet from the wetland. The animals in the wetland, they would say, come a little closer, you don't have to be 1,000 feet away.
So,
I don't mean to be
Again,
silly, but-
my question again is, what would, with your expertise, what would you recommend as an appropriate setback for each classification?
I think that the vast majority of wetlands you're going to encounter are not going to be already classified. But if you apply the same classifications to an unclassified wetland, meaning the classifications are only on currently mapped wetlands. So you're gonna have a wetland the size of this
we
room,
really
that won't
can't-
have a class.
We really can't talk about wetlands that haven't been classified yet because they haven't been classified yet. You know, we don't
Right.
know what we don't know.
Yeah.
But for the ones that we do know about, what would be your recommended distance for setbacks for class 1, class 2, and class 3?
Yeah. The problem I have is I know enough to be dangerous to myself. Even a class 1 wetland, if it's 10 feet away and my solar facility is in a cornfield, that cornfield is more damaging to the wetland than my solar facility will be. So I would say, don't have a setback beyond what the state would require, because they'll require 100 feet. But if we say about 150 or 1,000, you're not helping that wetland. So I would say 100 feet is reasonable for that situation. In my letter, what I wanted to say is, it's probably impractical for most towns, not all, or I could do it, and I'd even be glad to help. But it's probably impractical for a town to say, this class, this wetland should have this class, or does have this class, and therefore will establish some other setback. More practical than that is to do some sort of, and this happens all the time in the wetland regulatory world, some sort of an assessment of that wetland and the impacts you may be imposing on it. And then, based on the results of that, you could come up with a site-specific, objective, better evaluated, more reasonable answer. And that too takes some science and thought and work and money and time. So what happens in other towns where they do this, and it's getting more and more that way, is they'll say, come back to us with a wetland functional assessment. I've done it elsewhere. There's at least a few recognized techniques. The DEC developed one, Corps of Engineers has some that they accept, et cetera. And the applicant would have the burden of looking at the wetland, learning about the wetland. And it's a function of for example, a wet marsh might be great for ducks. A wet meadow might be great for turtles. A forested wetland, what we call a swamp, might be great for amphibians.
So just,
So depending on that, it'll set the
if I'm
setback
going
there.
to nutshell this, what you're saying is it might depend on that particular wetland.
That would be my best answer, because anything short of that is kind of cookie cutter that might once in a while be proper, but more often than not would miss a thing or two.
So what you'd be saying is you want the town to look at each one of those as an individual basis and make those judgments based on the project and the wetland, not as a blanket.
That would be the most scientifically vigorous way.
Right.
But again, I realize.
No, I understand.
Make the developer do it, make them pay your consultant to look at what they did and
Or
say.
the town does it, which is
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
for
the
sure.
reason why we would have an overbroad law so we could look at each one individually.
Yeah, I mean, you know better than me how you best do it, but yeah.
They would never put the solar farm in the wetland, correct? Or would that be part of the assessment of the wetland where they could identify if it could go in there? Or more than likely not?
The example I gave a minute ago of it's a cornfield and
Yeah.
everybody plows it and they don't even know it's a wetland, but a wetland scientist goes there and says the definition of wetland includes, among other things, vegetation that would normally be there under normal circumstances. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be corn. It would probably be ectosedum or some rush or something. And that's what it probably was 80 years ago. But by definition, today it's a wetland. Because if you stop farming it and you pull out the drainage under normal conditions, it would be that. So in those cases, the Corps of Engineers would say that's a wetland, that's a regulated wetland, more often than not. You know, some aren't, but more often than not. But then they would say it's also a cornfield. If all you're doing is driving posts, you know, think of a metal fence post, then to that dark spot in an aerial imagery that's otherwise poorly growing corn, they would say, here's a permit where you don't even need a permit sometimes to put the solar in that wetland.
Okay.
Well, what most people think of when they think of wetlands isn't the type of wetland that only a scientist can delineate.
Right.
It's, you know, picture wetland. That's what they picture. Those wetlands, no, we avoid those. And that's because they have value. They're hard to build in. The other wetlands, they're dry. By definition, a wetland doesn't have to have surface water. If the water's 11 inches down, or even the saturation zone, not the water, is a foot down, it could be a wetland, and probably would be. But it's not something that you would stand and say, this has to be protected. You would say, well, it looks like a family cornfield. What we do here better than that?
Right.
So the answer is sometimes yes, but not in the situations where you would rather it were no. Those are avoided.
I did want to give you some information. We are not voting on this tonight because we didn't get comments back from the county. Nadine, our town attorney, said that we should hear back in a couple weeks perhaps.
Or sooner, but I would anticipate by the next board meeting we should.
We should be able to. And
It's
I
the 239 comments.
wanted to let you know, the board received this wonderful letter today. So we haven't all had a chance to review it. I was actually the board member that chaired this committee to work on the new legislation. Andy Bose was also a part of that. And I had a brief moment to read this before our work session started, and I actually asked Nadine if we could hold off the vote, because there were some really valid points in here that I wanted to take into consideration, and that's when she advised us that we didn't have county comments, so we couldn't vote at all. I would love for you to continue your presentation, but I would love to talk to you on it, you know, on this matter separately, because like I said, I was the one that, you know, put this whole new legislation together, and I would have a lot of questions for you. So if you don't mind, I would love to call you.
No, I don't mind at all. Thank you. That's really very a generous offer, and I will accept 100 times over. I'm not sure where to stop or go on a little bit, but yeah.
Maybe we can
Invitation
get some of
accepted.
the highlights that,
Your contact information?
yes, we do. And I have an email for Nancy as well.
At some point, and maybe that can be in the near future, just the notion of solar is something that I think we ought to talk about, because some people think it's our saving grace and some people don't.
I think we're somewhere in the middle. Like,
And
we're
most people are in
new
the middle.
to it,
Yeah,
but we're
exactly.
welcoming it, but then we're also afraid of it. We don't want it taking over the town. So
Understand.
finding a happy medium was what, you know, we tried to put together and create for the town. So we're not experts in this field. I know I'm not. We had a group of about 7 or 8 people, and everyone kind of brought their expertise to the table, and we did come up with some good legislation, but I would love to hear from you on your expertise to, you know, add to this if we can.
Again, very kind of you, and I'll take you up on that gladly. There's a-
Okay.
Why don't you give it to Teresa, right?
I have no, what I think is, if we're gonna talk later, then I won't bore you or pain you with much more. But there is another figure around here that I think the public would even want to see, and maybe you'll have questions. It's figure 3 in your handout. I'm sorry, I don't have a big one.
Mr. Bliss, can you probably grab the mic?
Yes. I don't do this too much anymore. I used to teach and I did it every day, but I never used one of these. So what we did, we have a team, and they're mostly in New York City, but I never go there, that tries to site solar, and our projects are 15, 20, maybe 30 acres, probably average around 25. They're not the 2,000 acre facilities, which I worked on in a past life, and I got out of that, and it's just stressful. And in my opinion, what I'm doing now is better from the standpoint of what I value the environment. But that origination team, I guess is their name, I asked them, what's Van Buren look like for solar potential? And it wasn't so I can go there and develop. That's not my job. It was so I could give some information tonight. And they provided this map. Again, it's the town of Van Buren. And there's a mix of completed solar and planned solar. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planned solars shown, and they're known locations. And there's 2 more, this is in my letter, that aren't shown on this bottom substation line. They're not shown because the addresses weren't available, but they were recorded by NYSEG. That Jordan Road or Whiting Road substation is a NYSEG line. So that's one important point, is how many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus maybe 2 more. So there's 7 planned solar facilities. They're all commercial scale, or in your code it would be tier 4 utility scale, because they would connect to the utility, but they're 5 megawatts and under. And as far as like overrunning the town, that's it for the capacity. There's no ability to hook up more than that. That's the first thing we look at after we have a property that might work. The next question is, can the utility accept us? And that's a pretty expensive study, but sometimes it's no, and sometimes it's, yeah, we can take 3 more megawatts, or 2 more, or 5 more. And I'll let you know that this cluster right here is me. When I say me, I mean RIC Energy. One of those is probably iffy in terms of our ability. It's pretty small, it's like 2 megawatts. 20 is considered large scale. We're always at 5 or less because we're small players. A lot of sites, but small sites. And the other ones are also less than 5, but there can't be any in the, like the white spaces on the map, because there's no utility line that'll accept them there. And where there is utility line, which really means phase 3, if that means anything, in a 3 line instead of 1, the capacity is dwindling to the point where all the companies out there in the world that thought about Van Buren signed up. They're in a queue, like a list, and the list is now ended. So if you were to say we're going to permit every project that wants to come into the town, that would be it. So the concern for solar, some folks will say, I don't want to overrun my town, and they might live 30 miles from any site, and these, when they're done, will probably be not visible to the public. More often than not, ours, always, ours are screened to be not visible. So the overrunning issue is perhaps overrated, in my opinion. You know, that's not my opinion to have, but if they're out of sight, out of mind, you can't smell them, hear them, see them, there's only a couple, then maybe it's not the concern that you make, I don't know.
So
Yes.
could that change though? And what I mean by that, 'cause
We had this conversation earlier.
No, but could that change? So what I'm referring to is, okay, right now, there's no more capacity than what's already being planned or completed. But doesn't that assume that the grid doesn't build out anymore, right? And if you continue to have growth, won't they build the grid out? And if they build the grid out, then will there be more capacity and more opportunity? Or am I wrong in that thinking, which is entirely possible?
They're totally building the grid out.
What's that?
They're gonna have to build the
They
grid
have
out.
to, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like,
because of
as you.
what we have already
Already.
committed to in
Yes.
the county, development-wise in the northwest corridor. It's
So
not
if they
sustainable
build
right
it
now.
out, if they continue to build that grid out, won't they then have capacity available in the future? It may not be now, it may not be in 2 years from now, but in 5 years from now, might there not be that capacity for,
Yeah, I'll never say never, so short answer is yes. The likelihood is slim because of the cost. Even when you don't have to build the grid out, but you just want to connect, it can be $1 million. And the utility puts that on the developer. You know, that's our cost. That's why we.
so it's more developer driven, not, if the developer's not willing to assume that cost, then it wouldn't be built out. But if, that would be the only inhibitor.
It's a pretty big inhibitor. You know,
Understand, but if there's also, I mean, when, depending, I mean, on how you look at things, if we continue to try to develop incentives for renewable energy, there's the possibility that that becomes less of a deterrent if that's made more viable, perhaps? Perhaps.
Yeah, I can't say no to that. My understanding is it would be very unlikely and many years away because of the cost and the time it takes
That's
to
fair.
do it. But that's not to say 5, 10, 15 years from now. I suppose in that sense, I can probably ask the experts back home, New York City office folks, those engineers, to contact the utilities and say, can you guys tell us what is even
Well, I
feasible?
think,
What's even a
yeah,
10-year
but I
plan?
think from a legislative perspective, the concern is, if you look, for example, at when they first proposed, when most municipalities in central New York started with solar regulations, you're going back about 10 years ago. That's when local solar regulations started to pop up, right?
True.
What was there 10 years ago versus what we deal with now, two totally different animals. So even to the extent that you just said in 10 years from now, that might be a possibility. You almost need to have your rules in place now so that when that happens, you are able to address it and handle it. Otherwise, you have a situation where it's knee-jerk or too little too late. I think that's where, in talking with various town board members, that's the concern is, perhaps right now, what these regulations are doing is not addressing any particular proposal that anybody may or may not know about it, but it's more intended to address concerns in the future and making sure, kind of like with your wetland map, different. But there's only so much land, you look at the town of Van Buren, there's a lot of undeveloped land, and somebody can look at that and go, hey, look at all the opportunity for growth and development, but then you actually look at what the infrastructure is there to support it, and you go, oh, well, wait a minute, if you take the amount of property we have, we actually only have a very small amount of property that can be developed with any certain level of density because of availability of sanitary sewer or water or whatever. So the concern is more so making sure that you plan for your future, right? And you plan and you can accommodate the solar because it's a good thing, but you can also accommodate and allow for growth. That's a good thing too. So I think it's striking a balance and making sure that we have those rules in place so that in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're not going, oh no, we're not prepared.
Yeah,
But
I
anyway,
like how
sorry.
you think, that's, if you build a plan, you can plan to fail. The logo of my old division was a balance beam, and if you're the attorney, you'll appreciate this.
We like scales.
Yeah. One side was like trees and bugs and bunnies, of the environmental concept, and then that was one half of what I was supposed to do, and the other side was a social development type of thing. It had a couple buildings or something on it. So the intent was, like you said, a balance. And being ahead of the curve, like you're suggesting, is important, is critically important. So the planning boards, that's really what they do. And I used to work in local planning, I was a county planner. So I respect and appreciate everything you folks are doing, it's important. But at the same time, if there's a counterpoint to that, it would be the codes are also living documents that can change and should change over time. So if you start off with wetlands must be protected, you can't have solar in this town without a variance, and variances are nigh unto impossible usually, as a way to make sure that 15 years from now, you're still the way you want to be.
We're coming back to the beginning again, so.
Well, I was just addressing what.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I think you understand too.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna probably have some questions for you.
Good, good.
We've got your contact information, Wendy.
Yes,
All right.
I'll be reaching out, so expect.
Just one
Awesome.
last comment that I wanted to add in is, it's in the letter as well, but if you look at the figure 4, one other restriction that's in the code is solar facilities are not permitted on prime farmland of drained, farmland of statewide importance. When you overlay those two together, you can't have any other solar development than what's already been permitted under the old code. So it basically, you can't permit a solar project in the town without needing a variance probably for ag soils and wetlands.
Yeah,
I mean,
even without the.
we're definitely not opposed to the variances, so I don't want that to be some miscommunication. And I do agree with what Rick said, that, you know, when these applications come in, we do look at each one and try to understand what they're planning and where the location is, and we will look at that. It's definitely not it's a variance, no. So I don't want that to be some misconception up there.
That is excellent feedback. I'm so glad we came here tonight, and
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons, but that right there just paid for my trip. Because the way we look at it as developers is, if we gotta get a variance, that means they don't want it. It's gonna cost an extra 6 months, and the project is iffy financially to begin with, go to the next town. But if we are hearing that's not what it means, and come anyhow and apply for variance and see how it goes, and if the facts work out, you know, the standards you have to apply, not to mention talking about wetlands, which is a small standard, and we don't walk in expecting no chance, then that's good.
Yeah.
That sends me home with it in a good mood. Thanks
Thank
for
you
saying.
very much for coming tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure, really. And I don't have to drive too far. So.
Good, okay, thank you. And I will also, while I have a minute, let everyone know that we did also get comments from Ralph Mills about the solar language, and I will also review, is he here?
Yeah,
Oh, hi.
I'd like to speak
Okay, I
now.
didn't know
That
that.
would be a good time. You can get a microphone from Mr. Brooks.
Sorry.
I'm Ralph Mills. I live at 7376 Stateville Boulevard. I'm sort of on the fence about solar, so that my comments really are not about that specifically. I do want to say that I think anyone involved in putting together what I read for the proposed law changes is pretty significant. I expected to find several areas that I didn't think would be addressed, and most of the things that I looked for, first in a read-through, and then second, electronically searching the document for certain terms, were addressed. So, good job, fantastic. Specifically, decommissioning plan and cash reserve or cash security, and being additionally insured, the town being additionally insured, were things I never expected to find in this document, so that's fantastic. I won't go through what I put in writing, it's there, it's relatively brief. My major concern is that I think the town board and the town have a right and a responsibility to understand the financial benefit of these systems. That if a company wants to put in a solar system, there has to be a positive financial case for that, or they're not going to continue to support it. In 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we're going to have bankrupt, abandoned solar systems that the town's going to be responsible for decommissioning. And I just don't think that's the way it should be. So that's the one area that was not addressed at all in the document, is what's the financial benefit for this? What is the, and then in addition to what the company thinks is a good scenario and that they can make a return on, if you took away governmental assistance, federal, state, and local, would it still be a viable project? Because those things may go away in the future, they may not. Presidential election coming up, could be big changes, may not. I mean, all of those things are factors in whether these types of projects are financially viable. I think that's really it. It's the financial aspect of these things that I'd like to see looked at in some way.
I think that's an excellent question, thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Anyone else wishing to address the board? Oh, Andy, I almost forgot.
No, stop, come on. Page 21, S, batteries and storage. Right now, it doesn't have any kilowatt size of battery storage on site. You should have a consideration of adding standby is allowed to keep the thing running in case of an outage, battery backup for standby purposes. But if you're going to have batteries, which are just termed here in a generic, large, undefined area, they can get rather complicated. I mean, there's a solar farm with batteries up north caught on fire. They don't even know why it exactly caught on fire almost a year ago, because it's too dangerous to go take a look at. So I think that battery storage components should have a separate section and be highlighted.
We actually talked about that in work session, that would be a different law, because
Right,
it is
right.
very specific.
Yep.
So it was intentional to not put that in.
Okay, well, it didn't have like excluded or included, but you're taking a look at it. It's
Yes.
great. Stole some of my thunder out of it.
I tried.
And to Kevin, I like his idea about watching out for the small things in a project that really throw the thing on amok, like a small pond. Didn't know it was there, didn't know the regulation. I like that.
I do too.
And I do like the fact that the board specifically spoke to, just because there's a variance, doesn't mean we're totally against it. And I've seen that with this board, looking at different types of projects, that if there is a variance, sometimes the people can meet the variance, sometimes they can't, but they seem to be willing to entertain the variance to move forward on a project, and not to make it totally exclusionary, and I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Anyone else with comments on this law? All right, thank you all for your comments, appreciate it. It was a very informative conversation. It's good, it's substantive.
Make a motion to close the public hearing on solar. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. I'll ask for a motion to go into public hearing for comments on local law B-24, moratorium on smoke shops.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're now in public hearing for local law B-24. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of this law? I was figuring that this would be your...
That's all right. So, appreciate the town considering this as a moratorium for further study, so that businesses can be treated equitably, both those want to be a vape shop or a dispensary, or, I realize dispensary is a different thing, obviously, but it's an attempt to get things organized before it runs amok, because we've seen so many places where it's run amok. It changes, and you got to have laws in place, and then where you can work with folks equitably. The one thing I want to encourage the town to talk about on the vaping side of things is the retail advertisement of these products, and it can be actually applied to dispensary type products as well. You have codes for lighting, codes for signage. This thing about electronic signs bigger than the bakery, or even a sign the size of the bakery, advertising smoking products. And, you know, so by having laws in place, taking into consideration of that is important prior to getting somebody in the door, so you don't have false expectations. It's nice to have a little higher bar for things, because you can always lower it. If the rest of the project's a nice idea, and you know, you like it, you can say, well, we'll work with the guy on it. And that's part of the reason of having the bar. Because the one thing that I'd like to point out too, on the dispensary side of things, and I realize that's a different thing, I understand that Destiny Mall's got like a 20-foot advertisement for products. That's a Schedule I controlled substance that they're advertising. And I would believe that the town now, in front of something like that, could pass laws, say, hey, you can't put billboard signs in our town scheduling Class I illegal substances on federal designation. It's a way of looking at, you know, okay, how big can the sign be? And it can't be on the billboards, but you know, for cannabis, that's a different thing. Vaping is obviously a whole different thing, but you know, looking at proactively in front of, which the board is doing, I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks, Ian. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor or in opposition to this moratorium? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to exit public hearing.
Make the motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now, back in regular session, and on to item number 4, directing the budget office to allocate $2,000 to pay Usherwood for their Odyssey examination. This was a cybersecurity examination of our entire system. This item is not budgeted, but will go to our IT line. Can I get a motion?
Make the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Councilor committee reports and comments. Roger.
I have nothing.
All right. Mike?
Nothing from me.
Darcy?
I'll use my comments to just say, go Bills. I just want to make a comment on the moratorium, or the public hearing for the moratorium for the smoke shops. And Andy nailed it on the head. This is all new to us. The law that we had in place probably wasn't very substantive, and we really want to have thoughtful discussions on what we want that to look like, what is important. Signage obviously is a big one. So I appreciate the residents understanding why we want to impose this moratorium, so we could put together legislation that we think benefits the town and the residents. So thank you for understanding why we want to put this in place. And I just want to reiterate thank you to Andy, Mr. Mills, and Mr. Bliss for coming for the solar. We did spend a lot of time reviewing that language, and we did have a good committee with a lot of great ideas. And again, we really wanted to be thoughtful on how we presented that and what we included in that, so to best benefit the town. Again, we're trying to find a happy medium. I think solar does scare some people, but the renewable energy is the way we need to go. So just trying to find a happy medium. So I really appreciate you folks taking the time to come here and give your comments. I know it's not Darcy's favorite subject.
Solar?
Solar, but someone's got to do it. So thank you again for coming. And that's it.
All right, I'm gonna hold my comments to the end. Doug?
Okay.
All right, Bob.
Sure,
Lord,
I personally don't, but I wanted to say something to Lynn. Was Jen Sullivan would like to put together a Park and Recs committee meeting on Wednesday, January 31st at 4 p.m. If you could put that on the calendar for us? Yes, here in town hall. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what time did you say, 4 p.m.?
4 p.m.
Yeah, I just wanted a quick update to the board that we did get our jet router back. And most of our signs came in, so we were able to install all the posts are in, and probably about 3/4 of the signs are up. We just need to wait for a couple more to come in. As soon as they're in, we'll get the rest of them all up, but over 3/4 of Idlewood, the school zone, speed zone there has been signed. And still waiting on the radar controlled operators, but they're still saying end of February, early March.
Thanks, Doug. We're moving right along, are we?
We're passing.
Nadine, anything you'd like to add? I guess you already
I
said.
just want to let the board know that DEC's new stormwater permit has finally rolled out, and myself and the Stormwater Coalition are going through that, and there's several daunting tasks that I'll be making the board aware of over the next few months.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jason. Nadine.
I have nothing.
Lynn.
I have a comment. I know. I'm going to. I wanted to recognize Terry, she's not here tonight, our assessor. We had two big problems with the tax bills, and she went way, way above and beyond to fix them. So I just wanted to recognize her.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's the one who caught.
She caught more than the county did, and it was their error. So
Yes,
she
I
put that to shame.
second this. She did an outstanding job.
Yeah, she really
Thank you
did.
for your comments, Lynn. Been waiting 8 years for them.
Got so mad over the last one.
For 8 more years.
I'd look for a motion to adjourn from our town board meeting until February 7th at 7 p.m. Can I get a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.